Do 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 do. Welcome to the special post-Easter edition of Grill the Priest. So thanks for your patience. Thanks for sending in all the questions that you have to askfather@hfcmn.org. askfather@hfcmn.org. Thanks for being willing to share your thoughts and questions and to be willing to wait for me to get through Holy Week in order to start answering them. So we'll get through a number of them this morning, and then we'll probably have to do another Grill the Priest to catch up with those that we don't get to this morning. So we'll jump right on in. During this ongoing lengthy quarantine that has no end in sight, has there been clarification as to the meaning and reasoning for the 10 people only rule? Besides the fact that it is not at all adhered to in any store I've been in, it doesn't make sense in a large room such as the church, when family entities of 10 or near 10 or more than 10 are already with each other all day long, and there is enough room in the church to have 10 families in it with far more than 6 feet of space between each clump of families. Great question. I have raised this question myself. So the 10-person rule comes basically from the governmental regulations that they don't want gatherings of more than 10 people. I think they justify it in a store because it's not a gathering, it's not an event, and people can spread out, and that's an essential service. Of course, you and I would say that going to church is an essential service, and the White House has clarified that. And thankfully, we see that as certain governors have tried to clamp down on religious freedom, that the Department of Justice is clamping down on those restrictions and saying, no, 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 there are constitutional rights here at stake. And I think that's why the Department of Health has tried to work with the church hierarchy, so not to create this adversarial relationship. And so it's our bishops that are imposing these rules on us. And so that's where we have dialogue with our bishops, and our bishops are in dialogue with the Department of Health, and that's the way the rules come down to us. I have suggested that capping the church at 10 people doesn't make sense, but at a percentage of capacity makes sense. So we'll see if eventually that conversation between the bishops and the Department of Health bears any fruit, because certainly I can have a lot more space between people here in church than you can at the grocery store with those narrow aisles. So for example, Holy Family holds about 600 people. So if you say we could cap it at 20%, that is, I could have 120 people in church and have more than 6 feet apart from one another, especially as this question asks with family groupings. So anyway, we can hope that some arrangement like that might help us ease back into a public sacramental life. But an excellent question, and hopefully we'll get a good answer in the coming days or weeks. So, jumping on to the next question. My question, here we're in dogma. My question is about the Assumption of Mary. Given what you said in the previous Grill a Priest video that death is the moment when the body and soul are separated, since Mary was assumed body and soul, does that mean she didn't technically die? Very insightful, and thanks for paying attention to the first Grill the Priest video. The Assumption of Mary actually, in the East, is often called the dormition of Mary, that is, the falling asleep of Mary. That would lead one to believe that maybe in fact that's true, that she didn't die, that she in fact just fell asleep and then was raised up. You could also add to that our understanding of original sin. Mary, of course, is preserved without any stain of sin from her immaculate conception on. So one of the consequences of original sin? Sickness and death. Oh, well then it makes sense, doesn't it? Mary didn't die because she didn't have original sin, and therefore she just fell asleep and was raised up body and soul to heaven. That would make sense, except that's not what the church teaches. So the church believes that Mary did in fact die. Well, okay, how do we reconcile that with the Immaculate Conception? Well, Jesus didn't have any sin either, but he really died. Mary participated so closely in the work of her Son to redeem the world that she, though she didn't suffer any pains of childbirth, though she didn't suffer sickness, she did suffer death, not as a consequence of original sin, but as a participation in the passion of her Son. So Mary's body and soul were separated, but then it comes down to timing. See, sometimes when we talk about Mary, we say, oh, she's just so different than the rest of us. No, her difference is really in timing, that God has given her privileges that he gives all of us, but at a different time. You and I are freed from original sin at our baptism. So not at our conception, but at our baptism. So Mary got a timing on that. And at the end of her life, she also got a timing privilege. That she was raised up, her body was raised up to be rejoined with her soul in heaven right then, rather than you and I, when our bodies go into the earth, we have to wait to the last day, to the final judgment, and then our bodies will be raised up to rejoice souls. So it's a matter of timing. But excellent question, and we ask Our Lady to help us to keep on that path that leads to heaven. All right, next question. When is it appropriate for a priest to not wear his collar? Should they always display the collar in public and in the company of others? Well, that's a wonderful question. So it comes down to a matter of giving witness. You know, there are some people that think about our clerical attire as simply a uniform. So when I'm on duty, I wear my uniform. But you know, I like to think about the clerical collar more as like a wedding ring. For those of you who are married, do you take off your wedding ring? Well, maybe when you're going to do some type of activity that you're afraid that the ring might get lost or might get scuffed up if you're doing heavy lifting, something like that, working with mechanical tools. But most of the time, I think married people keep their wedding ring on because it's a sign of a vocation. And it's a constant reminder of that vocation and of the fidelity to that vocation. Well, for me, that's how I see the clerical collar. Not as a uniform that's worn during office hours, but rather it is the symbol of my covenant and a reminder of me to be faithful always to that covenant, to that vocation that God has given me as a priest. You know, when I was a seminarian, priest giving a conference to us reminded us, if you can't walk into some place with your collar on, you probably shouldn't be there. You know, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. I'll also tell you this, you know, sometimes priests don't want to wear their collar because, oh, I just get pestered or this, that, and the other, and people come up with questions. Of course, you know from this, I love questions, so come up with me to me with questions anytime. But I tell you, I have heard confessions sitting in the barber's chair, at the airport, at the gas station, you name it. And sometimes, you know, I get treated worse for wearing the collar. People will scowl at me or what have you because of the bad reputation priests have. Other times I get treated far better than I deserve because the person that's there had a good experience with a priest in their family at some point and wants to show their love for the church and the priesthood. So, you know, for me, it's not about privilege or it's not about avoiding insults. It's simply about giving a witness. I walk into a restaurant, not right now when they're all closed, but in a normal time, I walk or even walk around the neighborhood sometimes, and people see me, and some people don't want to talk to me at all. Other people want to talk to me, but they all have to think just for a moment. They have to confront the presence of God in our world just for a moment because of this visible sign. Now, can a priest not wear the collar sometimes? Sure. If you're going to be going jogging, you don't have to wear your collar. Or this, that, and that. There are certain circumstances when that would be certainly understandable not to wear your collar. But if you think about it as a sign of a covenant and as resembling your wedding ring, then I think it'll make more sense to you. The next question is about sacramentals. Holy Mother Church has several sacramentals. Among them are blessed salt and blessed oil. What is the purpose and when would one use it? What type of salt and oil is recommended? Should the blessed salt, oil, and holy water be mixed together and apply it to a wound, etc.? So very good. Now, I've never heard this about mixing sacramentals together except in this. When I bless holy water, I use the old book of blessings for it, which is permitted. And that blessing has an exorcism as well as a blessing, and it has an exorcism of salt and a blessing of salt, an exorcism of water and a blessing of water, and then it does mix them together. So there is a tiny, tiny trace of salt in our holy water because of that. So there is a mixing. But the sacramentals are not really meant necessarily to be made into a paste or this, that, and the other. And there are actually a number of sacramentals. Scapulars are a sacramental and other things like that. But what we'd use them for, you sprinkle holy water around your home. And again, the blessing of holy water, along with those exorcisms, also has a particular prayer for protection against pestilence. That is disease. That is a pandemic, for example. So use your holy water, sprinkle it around your home that way. A blessed salt can be sprinkled around that way too. I actually knew of an old Italian Monsignor who, whenever he would be teaching people about the faith, if someone had particular questions that they were struggling with, he would invite them over to the rectory for a spaghetti dinner. And since Monsignor was from Italy, he was a great cook of spaghetti. But he also had secret ingredients. When he would be boiling the pasta, he would put a dash of Lourdes water and a sprinkle of blessed salt. And he said they all resolved their questions and they all came into the church. So who knows? But certainly there is grace attached to sacramentals, and we do want to use them because it is a rich spiritual resource that the church gives us. Here's a question. We go camping a lot in the summer, and when we're out of town or traveling, we attend Mass at whichever Catholic church is there. I've noticed that in other churches, the Orate Fratres, that's Latin for the pray, brethren, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God, the Almighty Father. That's the prayer at the end of the offertory. Anyway, they've noticed that the Orate Fratres response is different, and it refers to God instead of His. For example, or that is, may the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands for the praise and glory of God's name, for our good and the good of all God's holy church, instead of referring to His name and His holy church. Are they supposed to be doing this, and why would they change it? No, they're not supposed to do it. They're doing it because feminism has come in with inclusive language. That is, you can't ever refer to him or his. Well, folks, let's be clear. There is an absolute equality between men and women. We are all God's children. Absolutely. However, Jesus revealed God as Father. And Jesus himself, when he became incarnate, was a man. And so the pronoun his absolutely is the correct pronoun. And to dodge it for not wanting to offend feminist sensibilities is wrong, not only because it obscures a historical fact of who Jesus was and of how he revealed the Father to us, but it also is a disobedience to the law of the church. Because it says right in the documents of the Second Vatican Council on the Liturgy, it says it again in the Code of Canon Law, and it says it again in the instructions in the actual Roman Missal that we use, that you are not even a priest, to add or subtract or change any of the words. Now, there's certain prayers in the Mass that it says these or similar words. But this response of the people is not one of those, so that priest should be teaching his people the correct response, and they should be responding that way to be docile to the prayer of Holy Mother Church. So, there we go. I've answered it, I hope, clearly enough. Oh boy, here's an interesting one. I just learned that around the year 591, Pope St. Gregory the Great concluded that Mary Magdalene, Mary of Bethany, and Luke's account of the sinful woman who washed Jesus' feet with her tears are all one in the same. Is this an official teaching? Do we have to believe or agree with it? I.e., the conclusion that they are the same person. It seems to me that reading the actual gospel accounts contradict this conclusion, and though I am no biblical scholar, I see many compelling points that would imply that these are indeed separate women. A very good question. There is no official church teaching on this. There is a lot of speculation. There are various traditions, and certainly there is this thought that they are the same, but there are other people that say opposite. So you think about it. Mary Magdalene, Magdalene's not her last name. Magdalene is a place name. So that'd be like saying Father Joseph the Texan, because I'm from Texas. Did you know I was from Texas? Anyway, the place on the Sea of Galilee called Magdala, it would imply that this Mary Magdalene is from Magdala. Well, Bethany is right outside of Jerusalem. It's the other end of the country. So can Mary of Bethany be Mary of Magdala? At first glance, it seems no. But there are a possibility, like someone who didn't know me could call me Father Joseph the Minnesotan because I live in Minnesota. Well, that would make sense. Unless you've been in the rectory and you've seen all the Texas stuff there, and you know that you can take a Texan out of Texas, but you can't take Texas out of the Texan. So I'm still Father Joseph the Texan. So is Mary of Bethany someone that lived for a while in Magdala and then she moved back to Bethany? Who knows? But there is a trend or a strain of tradition that says that they are the same. And that would also be backed up a little bit by the liturgical calendar of the church. That St. Martha has a feast day, St. Mary Magdalene has a feast day, but there's no feast day of St. Mary of Bethany. It would be odd that Martha would get a feast day and not her sister, unless her sister does have a feast day, the feast of St. Mary Magdalene. Maybe. I wish I could give you an exact answer, but I tell you this, I give you permission. If it's helpful to you to understand it as different people, you are free to do that. There's nothing the church says that you have to consider these as one person. It's still an open question, all right? Wonderful people to help us, or wonderful person to help us pray, a wonderful example of faith. Well, I think we still have many questions, but we've run out of time for this session. So stay tuned next week for another edition of Grill the Priest. God bless you.